Hey there, my name is ZW Buckley, and boy do I love when I get to make videos like this. This is one of those videos where if you already know what I'm talking about, you're just going to nod your head along in agreement like, yeah. But if you do not know what I'm talking about yet, then this video will change how you work with MIDI effects forever. Literally forever. And what is it that I'm talking about? Signal flow. How information gets from one place in your DAW to another. Maybe that sounds boring, but guess what? It's not. It's literally everything in music production. Recording, producing, mixing, synthesis, it is all signal flow. And when you understand signal flow, you can do so many cool things, like make an entire beat from literally just 4 notes. Let's jump in and I will show you how. What we're talking about today is MIDI effects and routing. I have here at the top of this session a single MIDI track with literally nothing on it except for a single MIDI clip that has these 4 notes: G0, B flat 0, F0, and A flat 0. If we look at the device chain, there's literally no instruments or effects. And if we look at our track control area, there's no output. It is doing nothing, and yet it's also doing absolutely everything. How? Because I am routing signal from this control track to the 4 tracks beneath it. And by doing so, using just those 4 notes, I can create an entire beat like this. To do that, we have to understand this area here between the track title bar and the track controls. This area here is how we control the input and the output for each channel and how signal is being monitored. Now, if you have messed with this area of Live before, chances are it was to set up inputs for recording your voice or an instrument. We can do the same thing with MIDI, even if we aren't recording. So let's focus on the sub. This very top box is where you select your input source. For most MIDI tracks, this usually just reads all channels, and you use the arm control to indicate which track you want to record onto at any given time. That's exactly how the control MIDI track is set up. When we click this dropdown, we see all available MIDI devices we might have hooked up to our computer, but we also see every MIDI track in our production. For the sub, I have selected the control MIDI track, which means that it is receiving input from the control MIDI track. Now, one thing that you might have noticed is that all of the track activator toggles are blue, with the exception of the control MIDI track. That is because monitoring is set to in. Let's talk about what that means and what monitoring is with MIDI. These monitoring controls dictate how signal passes from your input to the output of the track. If it's set to off, the signal doesn't pass. If it's set to auto, which is the default for MIDI and audio tracks, then the track needs to be armed for signal to pass from the input to the output. Let's solo the sub, and I'll show you that. If I hit play, we hear nothing. But if I arm the track, we hear a signal passing through. And if it's set to in, then the signal is always passing from the input to the output of the device. Let's talk about subcategory inputs because they are significant. To do that, let's look at the routing for the track labeled the endless string, which is one of my instruments that you can pick up from my website. We'll notice 2 things different about its routing when compared to the other instruments. First is that it's not receiving its input from the control MIDI track. Instead, it's receiving its input from the dramatic motion pads. The second detail that we'll notice is that it's receiving that information post-effects instead of pre-effects, like all the other tracks. So not only can you route MIDI out of one track into another track, you can choose at which stage we're pulling MIDI from that first track and routing it into the second track. So if I click this secondary dropdown under our input to select our subcategory, we're going to see various options. Pre-effects means that you are getting signal from that first track before its device chain. Post-effects means that you're getting that signal after that track's device chain. You'll also commonly see post-mixer up here as well, but because Dramatic Motion Pads outputs audio to the mixer, we don't see it here. We cannot route audio into MIDI. Now, this second set of categories allows us to choose a specific point within the device chain to receive the signal from. In this example, we can choose to receive output at certain points from a MIDI effect rack that I have on the Dramatic Motion Pads track, or we can choose when to receive the signal based off of the instrument, pre-effects or post-effects. The MIDI effect rack has post-mixer because the output of the MIDI effect rack, when you sum that output together, meaning the mixer of the rack itself, that's still MIDI. So we could route that in here. But we're going to choose post-effects. So why am I choosing to route post-effects for the endless string? Well, let's look at Dramatic Motion Pads. We'll see that the very first thing is a MIDI effect rack that has an instance of pitch and an instance of chord. This allows me to take the individual notes from the control MIDI track and then generate a beautiful chord progression with them. And we can see from MIDI monitor that the output is now giving me these rich, beautiful extended chords. Let me play Dramatic Motion Pads without this rack for you. A cool bass line, but a pad it is not. This rack is putting in a lot of work to transform the control MIDI. Now, the endless string has an arpeggiator on it, and so by sending the MIDI data from Dramatic Motion Pads to the endless string post-effects, it's generating these arpeggios from those chords. And that sounds like this. And the difference is pretty noticeable if I route it to pre-effects. I don't know about you, but I like post-effects better. Let's talk about MIDI routing within the confines of a single track, why it's significant, and why you should do it. If we look at this device chain for the endless string, the very first thing I have on it is a MIDI effect rack. In Ableton Live, racks allow us to split the signal within the rack to parallel chains that are then summed together at the output of the rack. In the case of the endless string, in this MIDI rack, I am splitting the incoming MIDI signal into two arpeggiators, one that is set to a free rate and one that is synced to the track tempo. They each have their own additional settings as well, but the output of both is summed together upon leaving the rack. It creates a consistent rhythmic pulse, but one with really interesting tension. Let's listen to each arpeggiator on its own and then once more together. This is exactly how you can generate an entire drum pattern from just one note. If we look at the drum track, I have an instance of scale in which I'm forcing every note to the note F, and I then have an arpeggiator that's outputting a half note rate. If I disable the MIDI effect rack that comes after it, it sounds like this. We just get a half note kick. But if I engage this MIDI effect rack, we'll hear an entire drum pattern emerge out of thin air. So I'm achieving this by splitting the incoming signal into 4 chains. And on the chain for the snare and both of the closed hi-hats, I'm using an instance of pitch to tune that F to the cell of the drum rack I want to trigger, and then I'm using an instance of note echo to generate the rhythm. By splitting the incoming MIDI signal into 4 chains, I'm able to take a single MIDI note and turn it into an entire drum pattern. And to wrap, let's hear everything together again. Four notes. I was not lying to you when I said that if you didn't already know this video would change how you worked with MIDI forever. Understanding routing and signal flow opens up so many cool creative possibilities. Rewatch this video, take notes, and spend however much amount of time you need to get this stuff feeling second nature. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. I'm working really hard to try to grow this channel to 15,000 subscribers by the end of the year, because we've already blown past my 10,000 subscribers goal for this year. And it's your support that makes that goal entirely possible, both the first one and now our new one. Till next time.